Welcome to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, brought to you by Pilma. This podcast helps lead lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Here is your legal marketing expert and host, Ken Hardison.
Hello, everyone. This is Ken Hardison, and welcome to another episode of Grow Your Law Firm. And today we have the pleasure of having Chip LaFleur with LaFleur Marketing, and I hope I didn't kill your name, Chip. And Chip is, I talked to him before we started this, and I'm very impressed with his resume. He got into internet, I guess, back in the early 2010s or whatever, or well, actually even before that. But then he started to work with lawyers in 2011, I think, and started his own company, LaFleur Marketing. And he does everything digital, SEO, PPC, the whole big deal. And you can talk more about that, Chip, because I'm not going to do you justice as far as your resume and your bio. So, and we're going to talk today about something that's kind of his hobby, but it's hard to find people that can talk about this, that you can actually understand what the heck they're talking about, because usually the people that really get at this stuff are so smart. Well, I ain't going to say smart, but they're talking such language that we can't understand it. Or at least I can't. So I'm happy to have Chip to talk to us about it in plain English today. I think that's going to help us a lot, and it's the fact that you like it is I think it's going to really help. So Chip, fill in the blanks of what I left out. I'm sure I left out some very important stuff about your background, bio, what you and your company do.
Well, thanks, Ken. I think you did a pretty good job. So, I mean, we do website development. We do some app development, custom software development. We do a lot of content marketing, paid search, organic search, built on that content marketing. We do a lot of automation. So automation, user tracking, dynamic content, all of the things to generate leads and then nurture leads so that by the time someone reaches out and calls one of our clients, they're ready to go. You know, what we find is that funnel has changed so much where 80% of that buyer journey happens before you even talk to somebody. And if you're just getting a lead, they're probably not going to be a great lead. But what we find is that if they can be kind of a developed lead, the likelihood of them signing, the likelihood of them having a better case starts to increase. And so we build all those things. You know, like you said, the security stuff is a little bit of a hobby for me. But it aligns really well with one of our core the core parts of our mission, which is to take something that's very complicated and to break it down and make it digestible and simple enough to get our heads around. Because, you know, our clients don't sit there and do digital marketing every single day. You know, that's not their focus. They've got a law firm to run. They've got cases to run. I don't know how to do those things. The best lawyers that we work with are able to sit down with their clients and explain to their clients, this is how this thing works, you know, and they sit down and the client walks away feeling with this aha moment. I get it. You know, this is why I hired you. The cybersecurity is, again, it's kind of a hobby. That's not my profession, but I spend so much time seeing what happens when people ignore it and working with it that it kind of inspires me to say, how can I make this a more simple to understand the thing so that people can act on it and protect themselves?
So I think I know the answer, but I want you to tell our listeners out there, why should they be worrying about information security at all?
Oh man. I mean, it's one of the biggest risks to your business that's out there. So we spend a whole lot of time thinking about our cash flow, you know, thinking about, okay, we've got this much caseload. How long is it going to take to settle those cases, get payout? We have calculators. We do the math to make all those determinations, because we know that if we run out of cash, we can't keep running a business, you know, without dipping in a line of credit. Run out of our line of credit, we're out of business. So we look at that. We spend time there. About 60% of businesses that are on the receiving end of a data breach go out of business in the next 12 months. So we know going into it that your business, my business, everybody's business is at risk. If your information gets hacked, you've got a lot of problems. And the problems are not just relegated to that realm of this is going to be a hassle. And so when you think about this, if you are subjected to a data breach, you now have, it is now necessitated upon you to inform everybody who's been affected by that breach. Well, what does that do to the trust that you spent sometimes years building with your client base? When it's gone, right? They say, well, if you can't manage this part of your business, I don't want you managing my case. And so it necessitates that you disclose that. Sometimes you could have a requirement to disclose that to the authorities. Now you've got that to jump through. Oftentimes businesses do not have substantial data security insurance. And so now you have a cost loss. Also, you can get sued because somebody stole, if someone could prove that they got, that a hacker got social security number, personal identification number or information plus social security number from your data breach, you can get sued for any losses that they experience. We know of the case with Experian and everything that transpired there. And all of these other huge corporations, well, small corporations are just as big of a target. And again, going back to that 60% of businesses fail within a year, it's not because of the inconvenience or the cost of recreating. It's because of the losses that are associated with and the liability that exists as a result of. So that's why it has to be pretty high to the top of the priority list. And now with COVID, you take a scenario where everybody was working in an office, and so all those connections were running through an enterprise level router that was keeping junk off the network and kind of scrubbing the traffic back and forth. And you're moving them to a house, and they're on some Netgear or some sort of Orbi system or something like that, which are fine. Like those platforms are fine. But you have a different level of security in a home than you do in an office. And you don't have the IT support, making sure firmware is patched and things like that. So a lot of ways through in a house that are not there in an office, and you're carrying that risk.
Yeah. Another thing, what reason got me thinking about wanting to do this whole podcast about, this cybersecurity and threats is I was watching the news, and, they were talking about the hospitals up there. I think it was in New York or somewhere. And, these hackers who got in there and pretty much just closed everything down and said, you got to pay us this much in Bitcoin or don't, we'll shut you down. And I mean, they should put them to, that's big shit. I mean, it's good. And they're sitting there already got stressed because of COVID. Then they're having to deal with this. So you got the data breach, and when you got client confidentiality on the lawyer side. But then what happens? I mean, we had this happen it might have been, I think it was this year. We had a big software company that does case management. They got, and they were doing it through the cloud. People were doing it, some of them had servers inside, some of them did it through the cloud. They locked them up for like 2 weeks, and all these lawyers could not get to their data. Oof. You know what I'm saying? And so they were, to say the least, upset. And I got a feeling what you said was that most companies don't make it past a year or whatever. I can see that because this has hurt this company because they did not. I mean, I had a lot of Pilma members that were just going nuts. So, and they said, as soon as this is over, I get my shit back. Excuse my French. We're going to another company, or I'm bringing it inside on a server. I'm not going to get out in the cloud no more, because it's too dangerous.
Yep. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the things I see. I mean, this ransomware has got crazy, and I think it's happening to some big law firms too. It's happening to everybody. I mean, and these guys are smart. I mean, and I think that's. I mean, what do you think the biggest cybersecurity threats are right now?
I mean, ransomware is huge. So
that's what I think. That scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, that was huge. And you're dead on about that. I mean, they can lock up your data and you can't get to it if you go down the wrong road. So ransomware is huge. Phishing has gotten better. Spear phishing. We experienced that in our office. So what'll happen is someone will get an email. It looks like it's coming from me. And that email will say, hey, I've got a task for you. Can you help me? ? And that's it, so it doesn't look like a threat. So they respond, say, yeah, what do you need? Then they get a response to that. And the response is, hey, can you go and buy this Apple card for me? And again, doesn't flag a trigger it doesn't trigger a response because they think, well, I'm going to buy this and I'm going to own it. Like, and then like the third is going to be send me the digits on the Apple Card. And then they're going to do some weird things with that. And they're going to link it back to your account. So, but that's going to it's going to appear to come from a manager to one of the people that they manage. Right. So they've gotten sophisticated enough to be able to follow kind of that chain and say, okay, we know this person answers to this person. We're going to make it look like it's coming from that person.
Yeah.
And then I would say central to all of the biggest issues right now are just is the same problem, if you want to call it a problem, but people, right? And so like people clicking on stuff is your biggest threat.
Yeah. I mean, I get it all the time. I mean, I just don't, like I got something yesterday about my PPP forgiveness, my loan forgiveness, click here. I sent it to my bookkeeper. I said, I think this is spam, but I'm just sending it to you to confirm it's spam. And it was somebody trying to, get me to open up something.
Yeah. Well, you think about it. I mean, the people who are, so hackers and scammers, they're also stuck at home right now. And they've got more time than they used to have, and they're more motivated to try to make money. And so they can take that extra time, and they may do a little more research than they did before, right? They can look up and see who received a PPP loan, and they may or may not be able to see for how much. They're going to spend the time, look that up, so that they have the right information, so they seem like they know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And so people are the problem. Unfortunately, they're also the solution. And so having a good, we use a program, and there's several, but the one we use is called Know Before. And what that does is
How do you spell that?
Know, KNOW, the letter B. What is it? No, the letter B, and then FOR, I believe.
Okay.
I'll double check on that. But that's the platform that we use, and there's others. I don't know that that's the best. Yeah, it's no BE and then the number 4. But what that system does, and there's other ones that do the same thing, but they're going to send out phishing and spear phishing attacks to test out your users. And then it's going to flag the people that fail the test. And then it's going to enroll them in some courses and some not long term, nothing heavy, but just some quick training to say, here's how to identify these things. Because you can always identify them. You can't, there are ways to do it, right? You open up the sender, who's this really from? It doesn't match. There's always a way to find out. But a system like that's going to help you reduce those issues. And I think it's a necessity. They're cheap, they're a couple dollars per user per year, something like that. But at least it keeps people thinking about it. And even if the platform is not that great, it keeps people thinking about it. And when they're thinking about it, they're less likely to have a problem.
Well, that makes more sense because, the problem is you can keep buying these firewalls, but hell, they figure out it's like a match. It's like a tennis match. You build a wall, they crush it. You build another one, they crush that when they figure it out. But what you're talking about makes more sense. You teach people just not to friggin' open it. I think that makes a lot more sense because that's and hopefully you got people that are smart enough. If you got the A players, and we were talking about that, that's what you want.
Right.
They'll be able to tell it, and take care of it. So can you tell me that I've been reading on this reading up on this before we had this podcast meeting, because I don't know a lot about, I'm terrible at technology, to be honest with you. That's one of my weaknesses. But I was reading something that says, there's a difference between a threat, vulnerability, and risk. What's the difference? I mean, to me, I'm scared of all of it.
Yep. So we can really let's start with vulnerability, right? And so a vulnerability is any access point, right? So when you think of like in a car, what is the vulnerability to the driver in a car? Well, the windshield or the driver's side window, something can go through there a lot easier than go through the door. If you're in a truck wreck and that I don't remember what it's called because I'm not an attorney, but the piece behind the truck that kind of drops down and the car plows straight into that.
Yep.
that goes in through the window, doesn't trigger the airbag, decapitates the driver, right? That's a vulnerability for that driver. They don't have protection right there, and so that results in a lot of unfortunately, death and injury. So that's a vulnerability. A vulnerability is anything that's out there that could be exploited, and so a person on your network who is not well trained, who doesn't understand what these risks are, that's a vulnerability. You have a hole in your firewall that you leave open to see your security cameras and somebody else knows what that is. That's a vulnerability. You don't patch your software when you should. You don't run your patch on your Windows update or on your server. That's a vulnerability. A threat is something that is basically aiming to exploit one of those vulnerabilities. And so a lot of times those things don't line up, right? So the threat wants to exploit a vulnerability on a non-patch server, but you have that patch. So they don't line up. When those two things line up, that's when you have a problem. And so then risk is whatever you hold to lose, right? So when you're talking about like ransomware, the risk is your data on your server. If you have an on-premises server, and you have a vulnerability that someone can exploit, the threat aligns with the vulnerability. So they send a user on your system a file. Your firewall doesn't catch it. Your email firewalls don't catch it. They click on it. That exploits that vulnerability. And then the risk is now your server's locked up and you need to pay somebody $1 million to try to unlock it.
I got a question because this is something that, and I know it's a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And I really hadn't talked to you about it, but so I think it's probably pretty easy for you to answer. But if you got the server there and you're backing it up every day, or you're backing it up to some place in Virginia or somewhere, if they close you down, can't you just throw it away and go get a new server and just download the stuff off your backup?
Well, in a perfect world, yes. What we find is that oftentimes people are not doing as good of a job doing that backup as they think they are.
Really?
So there's a platform that we use that we like. It's called Veeam, Veeam. We personally use a vendor called Virtual Systems. They're familiar with our systems. They're, I think, on more of the cutting edge. They're one of the bigger Veeam partners that are in the country. And so they know this software, they know the capabilities. We have an on-premises server for different purposes than most law firms. We're using it for video archival storage and things like that. But then we also have Office 365, which we store in the cloud to begin with through Office 365. So, we use SharePoint. So we have this system that's a little unique in the world. But what we know is that because we use Veeam, because we're backing up Office 365, which is, I think, one of the lesser known things to back up, because we think, well, we have Office 365. Microsoft is backing it up. They're not backing it up. Microsoft does not back up Office 365. They ensure the uptime. They make sure that you're not going to lose your current data. But if you have a bad actor in your office and they destroy some files, those files are going to be gone in about 30 to 60 days, depending on what the file type is. So back up your Office 365, use a solution like Veeam, and then make sure that you're working with a partner who's going to allow you to have off-premises storage and backup in a way where they understand your system. And so I've got a very close friend of mine who runs a law firm, and they got hit by a ransomware attack.
Really?
They had all of their content backed up, and so they did a restore. They lost maybe about a day's worth of stuff. However, in doing the restore, they found out that the backup maxed out at 256 characters for directory and file name. And because of the structure of their filing structure, because of their file structure and their directory structure organizationally, they had quite a few files that surpassed that character maximum. And those files were gone. And so, for them, it wasn't a business ending thing. It was very inconvenient. So nobody got a hold of that data. So they didn't get scooped up there. But if you have a good backup solution and that backup solution is working properly, then you minimize your risk ransomware.
Got a
And so,
question. Do any of these people ever pay this ransom? I mean,
absolutely. Yep. Yep, they do. So there's when you find out about it, it's rumored, right? And so like nobody comes out and says, "Hey, we paid the ransom." But I believe if you go and look up, you're going to find that Garmin likely paid several $1,000,000. So the watch and GPS company Garmin, they got hit with a pretty big ransomware attack. The rumor is that they paid the ransom and they got their stuff back. I think Steelcase, the rumor is they got hit with a pretty major ransomware attack. It took out like all of their computers attached to their machines, like everything. It hit them pretty hard. And the rumor is that they did something about it. So no company's going to say, "Hey, we paid the ransom," but those ransoms do get paid because the alternative sometimes can be going out of business, can be losing years worth of work, and they just can't stomach it, And if they didn't, then they wouldn't keep asking for it.
yeah, because but sometimes it could be more expensive, cost more not to pay it. I guess.
For sure.
I mean, for a big company.
Yep.
So I guess this is how we just got through really telling my next question is how you prevent this stuff, and you just went through it. You've gone through it. I mean, the way I understand is, you got to have the backups and understand what the backups are, and have training for your people so they can watch this stuff. And when I had my law firm, we had two backups, and we had one, and we had the office manager had to. It was backing up all night on some kind of, it's been a long time ago, so it's probably a lot easier. But we had it going one off the cloud, but then we also had a deal, and they would get in and they would take it home with them.
Yeah.
In case something happened to the building, the building burned or something like that, or hurricane. We live down here in Carolina, so get a lot of hurricanes. And thank God we never had any problems. But I just, back then I wasn't even thinking about ransomware. I didn't know. I mean, I'd never been. Nobody even thought about it. But I mean, I think it's something that you got to watch out for.
Well, and some of those things are new. Some of those things are new, and just to, what we talked about are ways to recover, right? There are ways to try to prevent also. Yeah. And even in the recovery, my strong recommendation would be look at Veeam's competition, because you need a system that is also hardened against attack, because ransomware is meant to infect your backup also. And a platform like Veeam is proactive to make sure that you have firewalled backups in the cloud, so that if you do get a ransomware, the ransomware doesn't get reflected in your backup. So the good solutions out there, and again, I call myself more of a hobbyist, but if you are serious about this, hire a professional. The cost is minimal compared to the risk. Get something like Veeam, because their whole business model is making sure that this stuff works for you, and they're going to keep your data safe.
Right. So I was doing some reading. What's the difference between black hat, white hat, gray hat hackers?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, we see this in when we're talking about organic search too. We've got black hat SEOs and white hat SEOs and things like that. But, with hackers, it's a little bit different. So, black hat are going to be people who are up to no good. So, they're people who, if we don't include the label of black, white, or gray hat, we're going to just call them hackers, or malicious actors, something like that. So these are people that are up to no good. They're out for your data. They're doing everything they can to get whatever they can and turn it into dollars, basically. White hat are going to be some of the penetration testers, people who are working for a company like Veeam, for example, to really put the system to a test. They've got the same sort of skill set that the black hat hackers have, but they're going to do all of that kind of hardening of a system to say, we found a vulnerability. A lot of platforms are going to have bounties on vulnerabilities and say, hey, look, you find a way through, we're going to pay you a bunch of money. So then they incentivize these hackers to try to get in their system in an ethical way, so that they can then pay out the bounty. Gray hat fits somewhere in between. So gray hat are going to be people that, actors who are not trying to take your money, but they are willing to bend the rules to get there. And so there again, you're going to see them employed in some penetration testing. They're going to be looking for some of those bounties, but they're willing to cheat a little to get there. Now, that sounds bad, but the reality is that black hat hackers don't care anyways. They're going to cheat to get there.
Yeah.
So, just as an example, a gray hat hacker might use some social engineering to get access to a password to then execute on the rest of their test. Now that's unethical, right? You can't do that, but that's where they kind of ride that line a little bit. So they still don't make it into that black hat category. They're not trying to get money. They're not trying to get something, but they are kind of riding the ethical line in terms of how they're behaving.
Yeah. So, you talked about it earlier. So I would take it that they may make cyber insurance for businesses, law firms, any kind of business. So I guess your recommendation would be to try to get it. Is it that expensive? Do you know?
It's not that expensive, but you probably don't have enough of it right now. And in my experience, insurance agents don't push it very hard because I don't think it's a very profitable product for them. But the reality is again, like there's a pretty decent likelihood that you're going to need help in that area. And that risk is continuing to increase. So, I would suggest having a pretty decent coverage there, $1 million, $5 million or more, depending on the size of the organization, but make sure that you're covered there. Again, I don't sell insurance, but this is a real risk to your business. And if you need it, you really need it. The costs associated with a hacking event, whether it's having to close your doors to rebuild, rebuild your data, there's a high cost to that. Your liability, if someone's data gets stolen, high risk, carry the necessary coverage.
Right. Well, we're getting towards the end. Chip, any other words of wisdom, parting wisdom?
Man, just train your people. Make sure you have backups. Back up your Office 365. I think those are probably the biggest things. Take it seriously. You do a lot of things and you work really hard to make sure your business stays viable. You watch your cash flow. You make sure people aren't stealing your office supplies. Make sure that they're not stealing your data. One other thing that I would suggest people take a look at is, a virtual desktop. We didn't really talk about this, but again, people are going home. They're taking their laptops home. You're giving them laptops and tablets. Those are operating on a home network. All those things are running through the home network from one end to the other. If you use something like a virtual desktop, what you're doing is independent of the hardware, you're just connecting to a server that hosts your desktop. And what you're doing in essence is you're having all your people on your team come back to an office virtually, and all the protections of that office and more are there because the team that runs that virtual desktop server farm are watching as much security and probably more security than you had in your office. So it takes a little getting used to. It's a weird interface for about a week or two, but once you get used to it, you're used to it. And now you're in a very protected environment. So if you get a chance, look up like virtual desktop VDI, you might see.
Is that the software? Is that the name of the software you use? Virtual desktop?
No. It's just it's literally that's just, you have your local desktop, your Windows desktop. It's just a virtual desktop. So you're going to use a client to attach to it. What is the one that I use? The one that I use to attach to it is actually VMware. So I use the VMware Horizon client to connect to mine. Again, I get this through virtual systems, but there are a ton of vendors out there that provide this, but I use VMware. I think VMware is great. I click on this link and it opens up another desktop that takes up my whole desktop, takes up my multiple monitors, the whole thing. But my desktop is the same whether I'm on my laptop, whether I can be on my iPad, open this up, and now I'm back on Windows. I just click this thing, but I'm on Windows on a server in a server farm, and I have all that protection. I have everything there, and it's a consistent experience. So
that's probably the biggest tip you gave today, because so many people are, so many workers are at home, so many paralegals are at home now.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's getting worse. I mean, COVID's getting worse. We're on our third surge, and I think it's going to be the worst one.
I think so too.
So there's going to be more and more people that come back to work are going to go back home, I think, in the next month or two.
Yeah.
Well, good deal. So, I appreciate you because, you could, most people will say, Ken, I want to talk about my business, my SEO and my things, I want to try to get business out of this, but I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. And so I want you to give out the contact information. And I think the one good thing that this has proven to people out there is that you're down to earth, you're easy to talk to, and you seem approachable and honest. And that's, be honest with you, SEO guys feel like lawyers and used car salesmen. They got a bad rap right now. Everybody think they're trying to fleece you. So I think you come across really good, and I've heard really good things about you. So, I appreciate you taking time. So tell them how to get up with you in case they got questions or want to talk to you about doing some business with you.
Well, thanks so much, Ken. I appreciate it. So I'm Chip LaFleur. You can email me. It's chip@LaFleur.marketing. There's no .com. It's just chip@LaFleur.marketing. LaFleur is LA. F is in Foxtrot, LEUR.marketing. No .com. You can call our office, 888-222-1512. We'll be happy to chat with you anytime. If you shoot me a note, I'll send you my cell number. You can call me, text me, you name it.
All right. Thank you so much. And look forward to speaking again in the near future. Okay.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Ken. Take care.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Until
it.
next time, this is Ken Hardison, dedicated to your success. Take care.
You have been listening to the Grow Your Law Firm podcast, the podcast that leads lawyers to more growth, profit, and freedom. Go to growyourlawfirm.com to find more ways to market and manage your law firm. Please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts.